Here now to discuss this, along with California political developments, is Congressman Adam Schiff. He joins us from Burbank. Congressman, nice to see you again.
Thanks, Thuy.
Oh, you're on the House Intelligence Committee. What is your reaction to the Trump administration now saying that 3 U.S. prisoners held by North Korea may soon be released?
Well, I don't think they should really be talking about it until the deal is sealed. Now, I would fully expect that in order for the president to sit down with Kim Jong-Un to give Kim that meeting that he's always wanted with the U.S. president to sit effectively on the same stage, that at a minimum we would get our hostages back. But I don't think you should send out this president's lawyer's new lawyer, Giuliani, to make this announcement when it's not clear that that deal has been struck. And I don't think the president should be suggesting it either. I think it undermines his own leverage.
And is there any reason to be very optimistic right now in terms of the long overall strategy? North Korea has released American prisoners in the past, including college student Otto Warmbier, and then shifted back to violent threats and confrontation. Are you optimistic that there is a signal here of any long-term diplomatic strategy by Kim Jong-un?
Well, there's an opening, and I think we need to test to see whether the North Koreans are serious. But you're absolutely right. There's a history here of confrontation followed by conciliation, followed by confrontation again. And they're coming to the table. Look, I think it's a great advance on where we were last year when the president and Kim Jong-un were comparing the size of their nuclear buttons. But no one should expect that this is going to be easy sledding or the North Koreans are simply going to walk away from their nuclear weapons and ballistic missile program. It's going to be a tough negotiation, and they are going to seek to divide us from our allies, from the South Koreans and Japanese. And the president is going to need to make sure there's no daylight between us. He has not been very good at that, and he needs to realize that things are going to get more difficult before this is done. But we should give it a chance. We should test whether the North Koreans are serious.
I also want to get your thoughts on the whole Stormy Daniels situation as well. What's your reaction to revelations that President Trump reimbursed his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, for a payment intended to keep Stormy Daniels from going public about an alleged affair with the president?
Well, it just shows you what a surreal world we're in, where the legal strategy that Giuliani announced during this Fox debut was, our defense is you can't believe the President of the United States. So when he said earlier that he hadn't been aware of this payment, he wasn't telling the truth. That's our defense. That's not much of a defense. And what's more, and I think this is why they're trying to walk Giuliani back now, if the president was aware of this payment, did reimburse Michael Cohen, and that payment, that loan of money was a campaign finance law violation, that means the president is now implicated in that. So the more fundamental problem is they're not committed to telling the truth, and this is why the versions keep changing.
Let's say there are no violations of actual law found here. Are there ethical violations?
Well, there's certainly lots of ethical violations, particularly if Michael Cohen were making this payment to silence Stormy Daniels and not telling his client about it. That would put his legal practice in jeopardy, his legal license in jeopardy. If Stormy Daniels was threatened as a way to get her to take the deal, that's a very different problem. And then, of course, there's the problem of the president's credibility, that he's paying hush money to porn stars, that he's not being truthful about it, that he's coming up with 15 different explanations. All of this, I think, detracts from the standing of the President of the United States and indeed our standing around the world.
Meanwhile, the Mueller investigation is proceeding. The New York Times recently released a list of more than 4 dozen questions that Robert Mueller, the special counsel, would like to ask President Trump. You're a former federal prosecutor yourself. What do you think Mr. Mueller is trying to determine through these questions?
Well, so many of the questions dealt with obstruction of justice. Others dealt with the issue of collusion. It certainly says to me that Bob Mueller feels there's more work that he needs to do on both issues. And in particular, he needs to get to the president's intent. Did he intend to obstruct the Russia investigation by firing the person who was leading that investigation for the FBI, that being the FBI director? Did he basically tell the FBI director to drop the criminal case against Michael Flynn? Was that also an act of obstruction of justice? But the president's intent is really key, and so many of the questions go to exactly that.
Let's talk about the head of the Environmental Protection Agency as well, Scott Pruitt. As you know, he is facing multiple investigations related to his spending and his management practices. Do you think he should resign?
He should absolutely resign. He should have never been appointed in the first place. He's an ideologue who knows little about or cares little about the environment, and he certainly turned that agency on its head. But given all the misconduct in office, and it just keeps multiplying every day, there are new problems, new allegations, new evidence of impropriety. The administration ought to just get rid of him. And I can only think that this is the president deciding that firing him would be yet another admission of guilt. But they are quite far from draining the swamp. They seem to be licensing the swamp and branding it with great big gold letters that say Trump. So I think he's a real problem for the administration, but more importantly, his anti-environmental policies are a problem for the rest of the country.
Just this week, California filed a lawsuit seeking to reinstate the state's ability to force stricter auto emission standards. This is now one of more than 30 lawsuits the state has filed against the Trump administration. Do you feel like they're making a difference, these lawsuits?
I do, and you know, thank goodness for our governor, our attorney general, and just the degree to which California has stepped into the void. The governor of California now is the global leader on climate change. When the president walked out of that climate accord, the governor stepped forward, and thank goodness that he did. We need to fight these reversals in environmental policy that Pruitt and others are trying to put forward. We've improved the quality of our air in California. Here in Los Angeles, it's much better than it had been in the 1970s, and the higher fuel emission standards are part of the solution. It's good for our state, it's good for the other states that are also suing the federal government, and it's good for the planet.
But not everyone in California agrees with what the state is doing. An increasing number of communities are now taking legal action or enacting resolutions, officially stating their opposition to the sanctuary laws. What are your thoughts to this backlash?
Well, I think what California did makes a lot of sense. It basically said we're not going to turn our law enforcement into an arm of the Border Patrol or the BCIS. That, yes, we'll work with immigration authorities when there are people who are here, who are undocumented, who've committed very serious crimes, but we're not going to simply become an arm of the president's very regressive immigration policies. Now, that wasn't going to please everybody, even in a progressive state like California, and so you see some of these very conservative communities say, no, we're with Trump on his regressive immigration policies. But that's not where most Californians are. Indeed, that's not where most Americans are. I have to say, this is the first president in my lifetime who simply doesn't seem to understand that part of his job, a big part of his job, is to make us a more perfect union. This president is determined to divide us, and that is so deeply destructive.
All right, Congressman Adam Schiff.